Flat Earth Debate, Uncut and After Show. I'm your host Nathan Oakley, and if you are new to this channel, or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification icon and join button if you'd like to become a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member and keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you would like to support the channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they premiere, and there's also a PayPal, Patreon, crypto and thanks button in the info box below the video. Speaking of Patrons, I'm going to do a quick shout out to all of you who do support me on Patreon. So, a massive shout out of thanks and appreciation to Rod, Kimberly Schmidt, Twad Wazzle, Jason Hornsby, Christoph Fournier, JMels24, Unimento, M, Iron26, Endless, Flat Earth Sage, Goldie McKinnon, Retro Bill, More Books, Cannabear, Fibre Oats, Bogey, Michael Kahn, John Kays, Patrick Gunnels, Banter, Will Brax, Mel B Styles, Troy Shuker, Hairy Blade, Mobile Mac 777, Neo the One, Rob W, Open Minded, Reese Pound, Del West Watson, Maria Neelands, Unbelievable Productions, Blue Ridge Ranger, The Real Gabster, Abraham Ahmed, Skeptic 936, Life is Short, Texas Mike, David Wayne Foster, and Dank. So another massive thank you to all of you for supporting me on Patreon. Now I will hand over to whoever is in Discord and Google so you can enjoy their dulcet tones while I set up for today's live show.
Anyways, I'll show you what that game looks like. It won't make sense to talk about this on the show though, because they can't see my stream. So, I don't know. We'll talk about this another time, Dank. Alright?
Later.
Yeah. Alright, let's get the stream. Anyways, for everybody else, if Nathan is recording, we were just talking about emulation.
Yeah, you remember that website, MU Paradise?
Yeah, that got taken down though.
Oh, did it? I remember I used to get all that shit from there.
Well, it didn't get taken down. It's still up, but like it doesn't have anything on it.
Oh, okay. But I mean, you can just download the whole packs now, right? Like every single game, like in a 4 gig pack or something.
Well, you know, this has been like that for how many years now?
What?
Yeah, they call it the ROM sets.
Yeah, the ROM sets, just every game, right?
Yeah, I remember when I was like the discovery of the internet for me, which was like the early 2000s, and I found out about that. I was like, oh wow, what the? And it comes handy for like arcade games because a lot of arcade games you can't buy them anywhere or they don't exist anywhere.
Don't tell me this fucking iPad. I was about to say.
Nice round, please.
But yeah, I discovered emulation like back in like the early 2000s that's when I got on the internet. I was like, oh wow, I could play all my childhood like arcade games that I dreamed of having at home on my computer right now. That was good stuff.
Mic check.
You know what was crazy for us was the what do you call it, when I went to Mexico, my cousins played Neo Geo, whatever the hell that is. They had this Metal Slug game, and I was like, what the fuck?
No swearing, please.
It was pretty much like Contra to us, right?
Yeah, it was run and gun like
Whoever
Contra.
said mic check, yes, we heard you. Please stop swearing.
Yeah, and Neo Geo games were like expensive. They were like at least 200 or something like that pop. Because like they had like a lot of card space, right?
Yeah. I just knew it wasn't available in the U.S., so I went to Mexico, and they had it in the arcade machine type, and of course in the handheld.
Well, the Neo Geo, like it was originally supposed to be commercialized, so you would buy the arcade system, and then you'd be able to swap the cards out as you wanted to change your games around. So part of the reason why they're so expensive is for the carts, but also for the commercial license. Yeah, but Mexico was piracy kingdom, so they already had it for 20 pesos, being less than $2. For they sell you the CD with all the ROMs and emulators on them. I think part of the reason why they don't want those games out anymore is because like modern developers, games are absolute trash, and they don't want people to know that games that had simpler graphics and were very easy to make are actually way better than their modern trash garbage.
Well, now it's just that everything's a subscription based. Like everything's those MMO
Exactly.
games. I still call them RPGs, but they're called MMOs nowadays on iPhones and stuff like that. Clash of Clans and all that. I don't know if it has numbers. I'm not interested.
I'll still play old and new games. Like, my moods will switch, right? I go back and
I
forth.
play Dr. Mario. That's as complex as I get.
I can't even make it past like 20 minutes in most modern games because the kind of games that I like to play, when you start playing these modern games, half the time you spend getting into it is like them literally telling you like how to use the menus, how to use map
Yeah.
icons.
The
It's like,
last
dude, I
game I
don't want
played
to
like that.
play. Yeah, I don't want to
Go
play a
ahead.
game about menus and map icons. I want to actually play action.
Yeah, the last game I played like that was pretty deep like that was Batman, and it received great reviews. It's called Batman Arkham Asylum, something like that. How to use the Batarang, how to use this. Like, oh my god, it's so much crap. And then now there's games about hacking stuff. Like, come on, man, I don't need to do this shit and this stuff.
There's a couple of games. One is Half-Life 2, which lots of people are very fond of, and I got that game when it came out on PlayStation 3, and I never progressed past the how to use this game page because the PlayStation I had came with like a light bulb on a stick that was a motion controller, and the start of Half-Life 2 it explained to you how to use the motion controller to control the game, and it was so unbelievably complicated that I gave up and never actually played the game. I stuck it on the shelf, lost interest, and never played it again. Now, the same is true since getting this PC with a game that, again, is more modern, but a lot of people are familiar with. I wasn't, called Player Unknown Battlegrounds, or PUBG. And I went into the game, and as I understood it, it's like a game my daughter likes, which is called Fortnite. Similar format as I understood it. And I'm like, okay, so it's a grown-up version of Fortnite. Right, that sounds good. I'll have a go, because I've played on Fortnite. Seems fairly easy. Point your mouse at something and press the button. Easy. So I'll try and play that. I couldn't get past, I'm not even joking, I couldn't get past the how to play this game screen. So it showed you how to operate the character, pick up weapons, and jump over things. I couldn't get past it. I couldn't get into the game. I couldn't figure it out. And I'm not saying, look, you're just incompetent when it comes to games. I am. Just a bloke who doesn't know how to play the game and has never been confronted with Player Unknown Battlegrounds before. Loaded it up. All I wanted to do was come in on a parachute and shoot things. 25 to 30 minutes later going, how do I get out of this tutorial and just into the bloody game? And I couldn't figure it out, so I gave up. Just gave up.
Yeah, well, I mean,
Yeah.
they're cool. They're cool, Nathan, because it's going to be very not intrusive, but very in depth game. But we just want to gun and go. We just want to grab and go. That's where games like Pac-Man come into play.
Yeah, but I didn't need to know how to crouch in Fortnite, right? I went onto the menu and it listed every key command and every keystroke and allowed you to change everything and map it to anything. So you could map half of it to a controller and half of it to the mouse, or some of it to the keyboard and some of it to you could map it to anything you like. So like, what do I want crouch to be? I want it to be the left-hand trigger on the mouse. So I map it to that. And when I press that button, I don't need a tutorial to tell me that when someone shoots at you, you crouch. Or to hide behind something, you need to crouch. But that's what the PUBG thing was trying to explain to me. This is how you jump over a wall. Like, I can figure that out. I don't need a tutorial. What I did need a tutorial was how to get into the bloody game, and that wasn't obvious, and I didn't manage it, so I never played it.
What things? Just to open it up a bit more, what things in life have trash UI user interface that we still put up with today? I would say like a thermostat.
iPhones.
Computer BIOS.
Wait, hold on a sec. What Nathan's describing is an advanced user interface. Why would that be trash?
What, the BIOS?
Well, you were describing an advanced user interface when you were talking about ascribing keys and macros, things
Yes.
like that.
Correct.
How is that trash? I don't get it.
That isn't. We're not saying that's trash. I'm saying by comparison, that's excellent.
The tutorial process.
The tutorial that tells you, now press left mouse key whilst running to jump over. You're like, I can figure that out as I go along, you know. But getting into the game, that's all you need. You need a button, a big button that says start play, or something like that. That's all you need. And then you can figure the rest out yourself,
Yeah.
or map it in the advanced user interface.
Man, but these kids these days, man, they're stupid as hell, man. I had my little nephew. He's a good chess player, actually, good, best in his elementary school, but he couldn't figure out how to connect USB-C to his Xbox. Like he had no idea HDMI, all the hardware. He could not figure it out. It was
Most people
borderline
can't.
embarrassing.
No, that's normal. That's most people. When you get into the hardware, that's the surface level of a computer, right? Then you get into the operating levels, the software, but then you get into the firmware and the BIOS, and that's like much higher level stuff. But most people don't have to plug a mouse in, plug a USB in. They go, "What's a USB? You want me to make what in Minecraft?"
Yeah, just that in my day, our day, every kid was a tinkerer. You know, if you had a Super Nintendo, you were ace. You know, but every kid was a super tinkerer. They knew how to make the cartridge play. You'd blow on it. You know, everyone had their weird way of, oh, you got to get an alcohol wipe. You know, we were all little tinkerers. You know, these kids are not tinkerers at all.
Well, you got to take the tinkering tutorial.
There is no tinkering tutorial for stabilizing a PC that's got a massively underwhelming cooler on it. Those sorts of things you just gotta. I have to swear. I need the Venn diagram or whatever it's called, the chart. With on the one side, you draw like a left scale, right scale, and on the left scale, going up the chart, you've got fuck around, and on the right hand bottom scale, you've got find out, and then you've got a 45-degree angle going up the middle of it, across both. In other words, the more you fuck around, the more you find out. I got that from a channel called Frame Chasers, which is a guy who deals with overclocking and just getting your hardware to work as well as possible to run games.
I saw that on TikTok yesterday.
Fuck around and find out.
Yeah, but he had one of a girl. You want one that's hot but not crazy, and then a girl. You know, you were trying to date a girl that's hot but not crazy, and it was actually the exact same thing.
Yeah, he ends that by going, if you find one that sits outside the scale, super hot, not crazy, easy to get along with, it's a man.
Oh, I saw this one on TikTok. It said, if you ever see someone, a girl park her car in backwards, like that's a man. No girl is parking her car in backwards.
That's not true. My wife can run rings around me in a car. So when I met her, she did it wasn't actually after I'd met her. When she first came here, it was only the second or third day, I forget which. But anyway, I fell in love because she'd got lost and couldn't find the entrance to this apartment block. And I went down to the corner where the main road meets it and just stood there waiting for her. And I saw her coming down the road about 60 miles an hour, slam on the anchors and power slide into the driveway. I was just like, oh, I got to marry this woman. She can definitely reverse park.
Anywho, what's on the agenda?
There isn't anything on the agenda as far as I know. And none of the regulars are here to give me anything to have on the agenda, so I'll just happily talk
keep
about
watching these videos of a Japanese society, how they're like a well-oiled machine.
If you carry
the
along
kids have
this
to
road,
clean their own schools.
you know, I'm going to start talking about my ramen stuff, right? Carry on.
That's exactly what I was talking about with someone yesterday. The kids are cleaning their own schools.
Have you looked at how the Japanese do their educational system to be such a well-oiled machine?
I think the key is zero outside cultures influence, zero immigration.
No, that's not the key, but it has to do with things that comprehension schools, which everyone seems to be against. Japanese is extremely based on that.
What was that again? Say it again, John. I didn't catch that.
Everyone seems to be against the idea of comprehensive learning. Where they tell you what to think, not how to think. But that's Japanese culture in a big bow.
And yet they think the world is round. But if you want someone to follow directions, Asians are a good place to start.
It's
Or
a
Australia.
delicate balance.
Japan's screwed anyways. They after World War II, they signed on the peace treaty to adopt Western values and cultural practice when it comes to male-female relationships, specifically like female rights and marriage rights, etc. Ever since then, their culture's been in decline, and they're basically going extinct.
Birth rates going extinct, yeah.
Yeah. And so unless they open up their culture to mass immigration and like a melting pot situation,
They have
they're
no
doomed.
space.
But if they do that, they're also doomed. So either way, they're doomed.
They're going to lose their
Western,
culture, like Germany. I heard Germany lost 40% of its 40% of its culture is already some type of African.
well,
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
but that's what you get when you start teaching people that if they have more than one kid, you know where that comes from, right? Make the stigma of having a large family. It's just another type of population control. So we're facing the same problems in Western society. China is facing it now. It's just it's going to be a capsize of population.
You know what's crazy? We might have hit max population already.
Why? What makes you say that?
Well, there's a thing called Mexicans, so never mind. We'll have that under control.
Based on the propaganda you've been fed.
Of what?
Where have you come up with this notion that there might be too many people?
No, that's not what he means.
No, that's not what I mean.
Oh, okay. Well, my bad. Maybe I'm misunderstanding what's being talked about.
So there's a rate of reproduction that's necessary, right, to have a sustainable population, roughly the same amount, right? And as soon as you fall below that, you don't have a sustainable population. But then like sustainable is 2.1 birth rate per female, right, or something, or 2.2, something like that. But once you get down to 1.8, you're on the decline. But then it's like when it gets down to 1.4 or 1.3, like you're at extinction level. Like your successive generations are getting smaller.
Yeah,
and
you're in
smaller
the death spiral. That's the death spiral.
Yeah.
Already.
It's not possible for those kids you have at that birth rate to make enough kids to sustain the population or increase the population. So your population will decline every generation mathematically, unless of course all of the kids start humping like crazy. But the problem is that women can only produce so many children per year on average. Like they're not all going to be octomoms. So after you reach the death spiral, it takes 100 years to get back to normality. If you then turn your birth rate around. So even if you turn your birth rate around, it's not going to be for 100 years till you have the same population level.
Right. And how many people do you know that have 3 kids or more?
Not many. Not even Mexicans.
I got 4.
Yeah, right.
Well,
I ain't saying they're not out there, but how many people do you know? Like I have 6 myself, but I'm not doing it for everybody. You know what I mean?
Holy
I
crap!
don't know that
You had
many
6
people.
babies yourself?
John's doing it for fun.
No, I don't.
I got 5. That's
But
not a
no,
lot.
the reaction to me saying I have 6 kids, that oh my God, you
guys
know
would
what
be
causes
super rich.
that?
No.
That's what's
I'm not
causing the death
reacting to you
spiral.
having 6 kids. I'm reacting to you having 6 kids by yourself.
You said I've got 6 kids by myself. It was just a turn of phrase that he was reacting to.
Yeah, John. You
But
not soft today?
the normal reaction to it is, oh God, you know what causes that? It's been built into our psyche as a population that have too many kids, that you're a burden on the system, or or that kind of thinking, and that's what's destroying our.
But my dad
No,
has
No, nobody
my dad
cares.
has
Nobody
a
cares about that. What they really care about is their personal system. First off, women are the source of the production of children, not the inception of children, because men are the source of the inception of children. Women are the source of the production. So they're the productive means. Means requires them to be functionally productive in the process. Women are taught that it's more important for them to pursue careers rather than be functionally productive as a baby making machine. And this is actually codified in writing in national documents, and specifically in the document from the United Nations that says by empowering women into the workforce so that they have competitive interests against having babies is a most effective means of population control, which we need to perform in order to stave the scourge of climate change and resource depletion.
and
yep,
doubles the tax that the government's receiving.
and everyone has a can't share Netflix password anymore.
Okay, this idea that it doubles the taxes is retarded.
Well, both parties are paying tax then, aren't they?
Irrelevant. Let me tell you why. According to the law of supply and demand, if you double the supply, you half the price. So by what they really accomplish with this is they take the woman out of the home, because the man could just as been easily taxed double or the same, because what they did is they split the wages for a family into two parties. So it's the same amount of taxes once it equivalates. All of that, look, all of that stuff like double the taxes, all that, it's all a ruse to get you away from the fact that their goal is to destroy the family. It's not about money. They don't care about making more money. They can print money.
Well,
Yeah,
What
they
do they
can
need
print more money.
for? Exactly. What do they need your taxes for when they can print money? Think about it.
So you think they want a population control instead?
Well, no, I don't think that. They wrote it in writing, dude, and put it out as a document. I just read it
And one of the
with my two eyeballs.
and
well,
one
that
of the
is
and one of
true.
the
And the
things
other,
that
sorry, that is
one of the
true. And the
things
other
that the
side of it is that everyone wants to party. So I'm 42. My oldest is 18, and my youngest is 13. I've got mates now my age who are just having kids because they've spent their whole life partying, and I chose not to do that. I went the other way, and I'm nearly ready to retire and get rid of my kids, and they're starting.
Yeah.
What's wrong with that, or would you advise otherwise, or what?
Otherwise, from partying.
I think what I did was good because I was able to work hard when I was young. I was able to work bigger hours. I'm able to spend time with my kids and be younger. And now I've set myself up and I've set my kids up, and I'm ready to go and enjoy my life now when I've got the money to do it.
Yeah. Have you guys ever heard of the lost decade? The concept of the lost decade. You ever heard of that?
No, but it sounds
Aren't there?
fascinating.
Wait,
Okay. So what the
AKA
lost
millennial.
decade?
Hold on, Gene,
No,
did you not hear him just start into something? Go
Yeah,
ahead.
Gene.
decade. Okay. What the decade is when they convinced everyone to pursue careers rather than children. They put it off at the beginning for 10 years because they're like, okay, 10 years is fair. But what happened is the kids weren't born, right? And 20 years later, the kids that were supposed to be there working into the system weren't there. So 10 years of production was lost. Now, it was lost to the community at large and society at large, but who was it really lost to? It was lost to the families, because if you have children young, they grow up and they're able to produce sooner, and you're able to co-produce as co-laborers because you're both in your prime of ability to be productive. And so as a family, when you have kids younger and they produce, you become wealthy. So when you take the lost decade over time, you lose money, not only as a family, but as a society.
Fair point.
So if I would
So
have
like
started early,
if you have 6 to 8 kids, yeah, if you have 6 to 8 kids, right, and they're all in their 20s, while you're like just getting into your like 40, 45, when you're at your peak earning, you can be there for them. They can be there for you. You guys as a family can take out loans against your properties. You can expound and exponentialize your wealth.
Or you can wait till you're 35 to have your first kid. Your wife can practically die and have to go to amniocentesis and all this stuff. Your kids are probably going to be retarded, et cetera, all these problems.
I'll let you know right now, my sister's 33 and she's doing the intravenous, whatever the hell, because she's a principal and, she had to have a career. So now, she's doing any and everything, spending up to $100,000 trying to get pregnant, so.
Yes. Dude, let me put it to you this way. Okay, medically, by classification, a 35-year-old woman having a baby is literally defined as, wait for it, geriatric pregnancy.
Yes, sir. I work in the
That's correct.
OBGYN. I know.
Welcome. Flat Earth Debate live. I'm your host, Nathan Oakley, and if you are new to this channel, or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification icon and join button if you'd like to become a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member and keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you'd like to support the channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they are live, and there's also a PayPal, Patreon, crypto and thanks button in the info box below the video. Most importantly, if you'd like to join the discussion, simply mute the page you are currently watching, then click the link in the info box below this video to join the panel and express your views on the nature of Earth. If you do join, please don't swear. If you do, you'll be ejected, and if you are, please don't try to rejoin the stream using sock accounts. You'll be warmly welcome back on the next stream. Please also share the show on social media. Sharing the show obviously increases the live audience, but this in turn increases the chances of a more diverse panel, so please share the show on Facebook and Twitter. Now we are joined by Neil, Refracted Curvature, Brian's Logic, and a whole bunch of people in Discord, so welcome one and all.
Yeah. Let's go, baby.
Hey, good afternoon.
I'm going
Good
to have me
afternoon.
some flat babies.
Good afternoon, it's good to have you all. How are you all doing? Just noticed that I've shared the link to the G Plus in the wrong room. So if everybody's trying to join from Master B, then there you go. Oh, no, I haven't. Have I? Yeah, I have. Brian shared it. Well done, Brian. Right, let's do a couple of housekeeping questions, and then if anybody's got a video that they want us to react to, we can do that. We had one last week.
Wait a second. So when did you drop this link?
I don't know, an hour ago.
You son of a gun. I'm here waiting to hit the button. Thank you, Brian. Some people are responsible.
Yeah, my bad.
I only shared it a couple of minutes after Nathan did.
Don't protect him.
Okay. I just had an issue. I've been having non-stop issues, as everybody knows, as I can't stop talking about it, even though every single time it's been about 10. I've said, I think my computer's completely stable. It then goes and crashes at the end of an hour or two of live streaming. So, in my wisdom, I went and got some new software and put that into effect and tested and stupidly looked on the internet for how to use it. They said, you do the stress test for about an hour, maybe an hour and a half. And you go, okay, fine, that's what I'll do then. So I did the test for an hour. Actually, it said half an hour to an hour. And it all seemed brilliant, stable, everything's fantastic. So then I do the stream and it crashes. So you're like, oh, what's going wrong? So I contacted Ada, which is the name of the software manufacturer, and the admin explained, you need to test for, what was the phrase he used? I don't know if he said a few hours, I think was the term he used. About as vague and non-specific as you can be. Anyway, so I retested, and after an hour and 1 minute, it crashed. So I upped the voltage to the memory and did the same test. After an hour and a half, it crashed, and then kept on repeating the process. So I got to about 3.5 hours without any crashes, and then thought, that's all good. That was on Friday after the show crashed, right? Then that's it, I'm done. I've spent the entire evening till 2 in the morning testing the computer. Absolutely exhausted I was. Anyway, come to today. having done all those tests, start the stream for the recording, press the record button, and instantly the iGPU overloaded. I'm like, my God, what a load of crap. $40 for that software? Puh. So, anyway, I lowered the memory speed, resetted everything. By then, I'd already shared the link as far as I was concerned. Maybe I hadn't shared it at that point, but I thought I had. Anyway, hopefully, we'll see. I'll do more testing because that's what my life now consists of, testing computers daily. Or one specific one that's important to keep running because the show needs to go on. And it is. So let's do about a housekeeping question. And in the meantime, hopefully I've bought enough time for somebody to come up with a video for us to react to. We will see. Any evidence of a self-perpetuating molten iron core at the centre of a presupposed spherical Earth?
Hello.
Negative, negative, negative.
Good morning.
Hey, Arwen.
Hello, hello.
Well, don't they say they can use P waves and S waves to measure to the core?
You'll need a flat Earth for that.
Yeah, it's spinning the other direction now. They learned that by reading P waves and S waves, right? So originally the P waves and S waves were completely wrong when they actually tried to confirm whether it was what the readout said, but they still used it to figure out that the core is now spinning in the other direction. Isn't that brilliant?
Right. But they used a flat plane to assert that might be their problem, why they're having such issues with their readings.
Can you go through that, John? So regardless of the inaccuracies that we can highlight with the Kohler deep borehole, finally said it correctly once, why would you assert
super deep borehole?
Kohler super deep borehole. There we go.
Yeah.
It's about an 8-inch wide, if that, borehole. So if you know what a borehole is, that's what it is. It just goes really, really deep, about 8 miles. Anyway, they got some of the predictions wrong with the P waves and S waves that they used to predict what they'd be drilling through in that regard. Okay, that aside, why would you assert that the methodology requires a flat Earth? Or that would be why they were confused, I think you said, John.
Well, when they're mapping the waveforms, they're using a flat baseline for the return of the incident angle of sonar or P waves and S waves. So they're using a flat Earth, and then they're applying geometric considerations to the flat Earth to make it into a sphere, which is corrupting their data. So that might be why they're getting the inaccuracies they are.
So regardless of how accurate we can prove it to not be, the methodology itself proves you're ascertaining these measurements by way of a flat baseline. That's a flat Earth.
Yeah, that's the primary thing you need is the Earth to be flat.
But John, why would you have to apply geometric considerations? Wouldn't that geometry just be there already?
No, reality is a problem.
Ah, damn that reality stuff.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, reality.
John, sorry, go on, Nathan.
No, you go ahead, Brian. I was just going to affirm what John had said, so go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so John, what you're saying is it's kind of like maps. They add the R value, and everything's all inaccurate, kind of like that.
Yeah. When you apply a mathematical principle to something that doesn't conform to that mathematical principle, it causes problems.
But why would the R cause problems if that's not the R that's been established and measured to be what we're on, right? Am I confused?
The R, no, we live on a flat plane.
Yeah, measured.
Yeah, you're wrong on both. You're wrong on both counts, Chocolate, and I'm sure Brian's keen to tell you that. But go ahead, John.
Yeah, I'm trying to be wrong today.
Yeah, there is no measurable Earth as a sphere. That just doesn't exist. Not even in what they claim as a model. Everything's a flat plane, whether it's a celestial sphere, you apply a Haber sign to it to make it into a globe. It's still a flat Earth model. So the globe, there's no such thing as a globe, unless you're talking about attaching points on the ground to the celestial sphere in mapping. That's the only thing that does exist.
But that's attaching points on a celestial sphere above your head in terms of the view you're presented with across a flat plane also.
Yes, Yes, but that's after you apply the, yeah.
Oh, I see. But you're saying that
Yeah.
after you've applied the sorry, I didn't quite catch that bit. After you've applied the Haversine formula, you can then apply what you've bastardized from the flat Earth measurement into a curved surface that you won't be referencing, because you'll be referencing presumably the equatorial plane, and then map that out through the sphere that's been converted by way of Haversine onto the celestial sphere. Is that what you mean?
Well, it's if you take the points in the sky and you create the celestial sphere, and then you take the points on the ground that you know are 90 degrees below that point in the sky, then you can create the globe with that using the Haversine formula. So yeah, it's the globe, like me and Brian talked about this before, the globe is a flat Earth model.
Yeah, because what they do is they
So
measure
then you
a
agree it
protracted
exists.
arc.
Hold on, just 1 sec, AI. Go ahead, Brian.
Thank you. Yeah. They measure a protracted arc across the sky. And what that is a degrees measurement that is just a perspective measurement. So they're measuring perspective with degrees, but they're using a protractor. So the horizontal baseline is Earth itself, and the measurement is an arc measurement. And then all they're doing is they're converting that, bringing that measurement to the center of the pre-assumed globe and making that horizontal measurement along the Earth, which is what it is, and turning that into an arc, the same arc they measured across the sky. So they're not measuring any physical anything. They're measuring an arc, a projected arc in the sky, and then pretending that that's the Earth that they measured. That's the best way to describe it.
Go ahead, AI.
Right. So first he said the globe didn't exist. Then he said they do this to create a globe, meaning that the end result is a globe. So then the globe definitely exists. The question then is, what
hold on,
category is
just
the
one
globe
correction.
in?
Sorry, just 1 second, AI. Yes, you're strictly correct. However, to quote Rumpus, the globe only exists in the maths. So if you're saying he's conjured its existence in mathematics, he has. But his point was, in reality, the globe doesn't exist, I believe.
Well, reality is the mind space in which we inhabit and the physical space in which we inhabit. And if a globe exists, it must exist in some category. If defined by Rumpus that it exists in the mass, then it's a mathematical construct. So then what use is it in reality? At best, it would be an interface, similar to a graphical user interface. Doesn't have to represent actual functional physics or underlying geometry. It just has to be usable by the end user. And so by that standard, the globe is some type of useful interface for certain purposes that certain people use for certain things, and that's fine.
You've got to admire that,
fine.
right? No.
The problem
Everyone
is,
stop. Everyone stop.
here's the problem.
Stop. I just want to admire what you just did there. That was amazing. Right, you've got to admire a sharp mind when you experience it, right? What you've done, and it was very clever, I've got to admit, is make you right and still include John's correct assertion, but point out that your overarching point is that if I say that we've got the Matrix as a concept in a film, and I say the Matrix is not real, and you go, well, no, by saying the word Matrix and knowing between you and I what the Matrix is, by definition, it is very much real because we're discussing it. It can't not be. Otherwise, we wouldn't have the word to describe it. It wouldn't be in existence. However, the physics of the ground beneath our feet is not sphere-shaped. But that's not what John said. Yes, you are absolutely correct, and I admire the way you did that there, AI. Very good. Love it.
Right, it would be how you define what real is at that point.
The physical ground we interact with.
It'd be that Nathan understands perfectly, and you still got to catch up. So we have to use a graphical user interface to explain it to you.
No, right.
Okay, well, no, hold on. What define real?
By asking me to define real, you're admitting that you don't know what we're talking about.
No.
So
no, you don't know what you're talking about if you don't define it.
No, I do know what I'm talking about.
It's the difference between, you appreciate that there is actually a game called The Sims, and they are little simulated people inside a computer game. Now, if the assertion was, by contrast or comparison, that we live in that world, now, a very glaring reification fallacy. But if we are to say that someone speculates that we are as the Sims game, yeah, then to say simulation of reality is not real is akin to saying the globe in this context that AI is using is not real. It is. It's an interface for reference when you have a Haversine conversion of a flat surface measured in physical reality, the one that we actually dwell atop. But to say that the globe isn't real is wrong, and the correction I gave, which is from Rumpus, is it only exists in the maths. Earth curve only exists in maths. Well, that's true, but it means it exists, strictly speaking, just in maths. Conceptually.
Right. Conceptually. Right.
The
But
globe model.
I can conceptualize a unicorn. Does that make it real?
No, not in physical, experienceable terms that you can pet. No.
Yeah.
Okay, it makes it
It's how you
real.
define real.
It's a real
It's how
concept.
you
It's a
define
real. It's a real conception, but it's not a real object
how-
that exists in tangible reality.
There's a reason I'm letting this
How
be
you
thrashed out, right,
define-
John? And the reason is poignant to what we discuss here, because there's actually a very, very fine line between these two things. Very fine. Now, the perception of our reality, up until only recently, let's call it max 8 years for the people here, was a globe in physical reality in space. That was our reality. What does that mean? Well, it means that your reality can exist and be quote unquote real merely because the mind's eye of the experiencer, which in this case has no experience to actually define in this regard when it comes to space, they have made it real in their mind's eye. That means that the controllers, because we discussed this in the pre-show, the person who has control of the outlook of person B, me in this example, who's experiencing the mind's eye version of space and globe in a vacuum and saying that is reality for me in my mind's eye at that moment. Well, if you can create that reality for another person, you've taken them from the very grounded real world that they live in and taken them into a fantasy world that you have created. It's almost godlike because of the fine line between reality and the suspension of disbelief. And often people don't know where the line is drawn. And for me, this is the most important thing on the show that we deal with, because that's the key to how we were programmed. So the how of the deception is the suspension of disbelief. I always use the example with Superman. You go to the cinema, you sit down, you watch Superman. You accept as an audience member when you're watching it that there aren't really people from Krypton who fly around. That isn't actually real. That is a suspension of disbelief. You know it's not real, but you accept that it's not real so it doesn't spoil the movie, to dumb it down a bit. So when you are suspending disbelief and watching Superman fly around the globe to make it spin the other direction to turn back time, for example, the notions of time being a physically manipulatable fabric for Superman, or the notion of Superman being in a sky vacuum, or the notion of the globe itself, none of them are necessarily recognized by you, the audience member sat in the cinema, as a suspension of disbelief. It's not told to you. You're not explicitly told that you are suspending disbelief in more than one way. The surface level suspension, you accept willingly. I know there aren't really men that fly around. Oh no, great, I know how to suspend disbelief, even though you probably don't know what the term is until I've just used it now, or maybe you do, it doesn't matter. But the point is that the people who understand that fine line will, can, do, and are manipulating the world. The one world religion, the globe religion, is merely a magic trick. It's a suspension of disbelief. But how powerful is that when, at the start of this little amble, I explained that in your mind's eye, that becomes your reality. So when we talk about what is real, well, the perception that you have in your mind's eye for you at that time, that is your reality. As much as some people want to take that away, That is your reality. So for your globe guy, I'm nearly there. 30 more seconds. For your average globe guy who'll come here, the reason they're so arrogant, the reason they're so cocksure about their globe faith, is because it is their reality at that point in time. There isn't any alternative. That's a powerful magic trick that's been put in place to get them there. I'm done.
I just want to point out the definition of the word real is actually existing as a thing or occurring in fact, not imagined or supposed.
So if I said
no.
that the use of the globe in a navigational context is very much real, John, that would be a true statement. Making it real.
No, that would make
fair
the
point,
celestial spheres
but
applying
it's a fair point.
Oh,
But
hold on, AI.
but
Go
it's
ahead,
still
John.
apply.
Just one more time, John. Go ahead.
That would make it an application of mathematics. No, it wouldn't be real.
Could be a real
Okay.
concept though.
Let's
No,
bring
no,
up
that's
a logical fallacy.
no.
Hold on, John. Hold on.
Dictionary fallacy.
Hold on,
Just
John.
because someone defines something.
Just one more time,
Oh
AI.
my
So,
goodness.
everyone stop. Go ahead, AI, from the top.
Okay. There is a fallacy known as the dictionary fallacy. That just because it's defined as such doesn't mean that that's what it is in reality. For example, you can go to a dictionary and find level means adhering to the surface curvature of Earth's water. Does that mean that that's true? Not necessarily. Does that mean that that's the connotative or denotative sense of the term? Not necessarily. You can't just arbitrate all decisions based on finding an entry in a dictionary. So, for example, there's an exclusion of categories here.
Hold on, that's not fair. That we don't do that here. We exercise the Socratic method. So it's not necessarily the case that we'll go by just the dictionary definition. That's not what we do.
Well, I'm not saying anyone is. I'm saying that if one does that in any particular instance, then they're making an error.
No, that's fair enough. You're not accusing it of us. You're just saying that's
when
the point.
you
define it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, you can go next, John.
You can repeat the same thing ad infinitum.
And then go ahead,
tedious.
John. Sorry, AI, just one sec. Go ahead, John, after AI's just finished his thought and wrapped up. Go ahead, AI.
Okay, so already on the table, we've defined that real things occur which aren't tangible objects in physical reality. Okay, so for example, you might ask yourself, am I really dreaming, or is what happens in my dream real? Well, if you say is what happens in my dream tangible objects that manifest in physical reality, then the answer would be no. But if you say to yourself, is my dream real? Then yes, you've experienced the dream. It existed in not a tangible sense, but in a present sense, right? There are plenty of things that don't exist in tangible reality that are real. Thoughts are real, emotions are real, and yes, even though imaginations is said to not be real, what they're meaning in that connotation is that if you imagine a 2x4 is in front of you, the 2x4 isn't actually in front of you, but the imagination itself is real in that sense, that you're imagining it. So the globe most certainly is real. It's just not a tangible object.
Okay.
Well, say about is
hold on.
Nathan.
John's in the queue, and then we'll get to you, Brian. But I'm going to shout out Original D Rose in the meantime. So shout out to Original D Rose, who says, let's just bring it up on screen, just one sec. He says, the issues are potent delusion, arrogant ignorance, severe cognitive dissonance, and die-hard heliocentric discipleship. That simple. A string of beautiful words. I've got to be honest, D Rose. Wonderful, like silk. But yeah, I especially like heliocentric discipleship. Thank you very much for the super chat. And you're absolutely right. Yes, it is all of those things. Go ahead, John, then Brian.
Right. Well, I used the word real the first time, and I defined it by what I meant. And then I was told I was wrong, and he defined imagination as real. I don't see how you can have any kind of...
Let me just try something with you, John, and then we'll get to Brian. Can you, just for the sake of this example, can you just, in your mind, imagine a unicorn? I'm not saying it's physically real. I just want you to imagine one for the sake of this example. Are you doing that?
Mm-hmm.
Are you really doing that, though?
What do you mean by really, though? Are you saying
you spotted my little trick
real
too sharp.
imagination? You see what I mean?
Yeah, well, I'm just asking.
Moron.
Are you really
But at the
doing?
same time,
We're straight into the Socratic method, just by the way I've rephrased the question, though, aren't we? That's the point. So, what do I mean by really imagining it? Exactly.
Well, but at the
Okay, I
same
can break this
time,
down so
the reason that
simple.
we can't go
Hold
this
on, hold
deep
on. We
is
got.
because
Hold on. John's going to finish off his thought, Eli. Then Brian. Then presumably Ali is going to want to refute something that's been said, and then we'll get to you. Hello, Sleeping Warrior. Right. So where were we? We were at Brian, I believe. Maybe John. I forget now.
Well, I
hey,
just
John
want to say
still has
that
something to
it's,
say.
Go ahead, John.
yeah, it's just when you confuse the ideas of conceptual with actual, and you start confusing these concepts. That's what's got us in the situation we're in, because apparent and actual to some people are the same thing. Real and imagined are the same thing, and that's a problem. So maybe it is a problem in the language when you really think about it.
Yes, it is. It's something that's been taken advantage of. Go ahead, Brian.
Thanks, Nathan. I'll be as short as possible. Yeah, circles exist in reality. We can draw a circle. The globe model is the mathematics of a circle. That's what it is. It's the doubling of a protractor. As a way of a protractor is what? It is a device for orthographically, the attempt to orthographically represent perspective. The globe model is a hijacking of perspective, but as a mathematical model, it does exist. Circles exist, and it's based off the math of a circle. And that's what there is no globe. Like, what I mean is that the whole globe is just circle, just a flat 2D circle. That's what the globe model is. It does exist. It exists mathematically.
Yeah, but it doesn't exist in reality.
Hold on, Neil. Okay, right.
No,
So AI is going to want to say something. Then Eli's got a point to make. Hopefully, he's still held that thought. Go ahead, AI.
All right, so ask some questions which are rhetorical, and then I'm going to give a definitive experiment. So, are dreams real? Are what you dream real experiences?
No.
The answer to both is yes, yet none of that exists in tangible physical reality. Rest assured you are experiencing real experiences. Rest assured dreams are real, they do exist. They don't have any weight, they don't have any electrons, they don't have any physics, they have none of these things, yet they are real. Okay, now we're going to do the experiment. Everybody go find a photograph of a human being that you know is a human being image. Look at that photograph and answer this question. Is that a human being? The answer is no. It's an image of a human being. Now, you can then create a fake image of a human being using artistic talent that looks very, very real, as if it was a true image of a true photograph. You could then say to somebody else, this is a real person. Now, first, you must get over the problem that it's not a real person. It's actually just an image of an alleged real person. And on top of that, it's not a real person because it doesn't represent anybody that actually exists in tangible reality. But rest assured, it is a very real image. So now that I've proven my point conclusively, I'll yield the floor.
Right, we're going to read out a couple of subjects.
What was the independent variable?
We will get to Neil as well.
Yeah.
It's Eli next. Not before I've read out some super chats, though. Thank you very much to James Richard, who says, if everyone has a different imagination of space and what's in it, then it's not real, because you must imagine it. Definition of real, not to imagine. Thank you very much for the super chat. Really appreciate the support. Also, JMails24, thank you very much indeed also for the super chat. He says, the depth of thought, provoking insight and knowledge in this conversation requires at least, I don't know, say 4 more hours to work through. I think you're saying, right, we're not going to get to the end of this unless we have 4 more hours. I assume that's the sentiment behind that super chat, JMails24. Thank you very much indeed for it. Maybe we'll get 4 more hours. We'll see. 109 people watching. Please share the show. Last but by no means least, I will cut off the super chats and read some more later if there's any more that come in. Godzilla37, thank you very much. I gifted 5 memberships. You think Nathan would notice? Also, good morning. Thank you very much, Godzilla. Apparently 5 memberships have been gifted. I know I did not notice. I was so engrossed in this fascinating conversation about the suspension of disbelief and what is real. Fascinating stuff. Thank you all so much for the super chats. Right, You've been hanging on for ages, Eli. Neil, if you've just got one word to get in, go ahead, and then Eli. It's not a race thing. Go ahead, Neil.
No, I'm okay. Go ahead, Eli.
Go ahead, Eli.
Okay, I'll try to make this as quick as possible because I know my audio is kind of wonky with me being on the train. So what John said is very true and very relevant. The thing is, AI basically the point of what AI is doing right now is to help us make a distinction between what John said and what the other real is for the simple people out there. It's like both are real, but it's real in a different sense. And we know that there's a real distinction when we're describing these things. For instance, this entire conversation means nothing if we weren't talking about things that really happened in the conversation in the last 25 minutes.
Sure, but that's, other than the recording, that's intangible, isn't it? Because we're talking about sometimes emotion, sometimes information, none of it's tangible. Whereas when we're defining what is real in terms of the physics of the ground beneath our feet, the word real has a very different implication.
Quick question.
Yeah, of course. That's why.
Before you go,
that's why
Before
we're
you
talking
do-
about it.
Go on. Did you want to get something in, Neil? Then I'm sure D-Rose. Go ahead, Neil. Was there something else?
No, I just wanted to know what the independent variable was. The photograph? Was joking.
You did say
Okay, I'm
experiment.
glad you
did
asked
pick up on
that. I'm so glad you asked that. I'm so glad if you will let me answer.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so two people attempted to critique what I said based on a misinterpretation of the word experiment. They were assuming the connotation of the word and the denotation of the word to be referring to a scientific experiment. And they attempted to critique it using a lexical fallacy by transposing the meaning of the word, rather than take what I was saying in the obvious sense in which I was saying it. So the experiment was actually to see who would respond, and you fell for it. So my experiment passed with flying colors.
It did. Okay, that's
Well,
it's worth a word of warning. So there's a couple of things that you can't get away with unless contextually your opponent has defined what they are discussing within the confines of science. Now, occasionally I'll play fast and loose with this by going, we're in this realm whether you like it or not. Look at the title. Flat Earth debate. That very much categorizes it into natural science. So when you say experiment, I'm going to, like I say, play fast and loose with it to get it onto the topic that we are actually debating. In that regard, it's not fast and loose, it's to the point, it's specific. But in this regard, right, just because somebody said experiment doesn't mean that he's put any scientific, and he didn't, right, I listened carefully, scientific connotations around that word. If you've got BMX, I think this was QE's example to me with the exact same point.
It was a joke.
It doesn't matter, Neil, it's a good point, it's a good example for the audience, perfect. And he's done it deliberately, so he wanted that. So let's let it ride. It's a good example and a useful teaching tool, right? Unless your opponent is talking within the confines of natural science and they start using words like experiment, theory, yeah, you can't peg them on it. You can't suddenly call foul and start asking for independent variables. It reminds me of Spurs back in the day when we all first learnt this stuff, right? As blank pages, not really knowing Ras from our elbow when it came to science. We get taught it. The next thing you know, you hear certain key words and you start going, what's your independent variable? It's like, no. They haven't actually claimed science, right? And if I'm to talk about, well, I got my BMX and I set up the ramp and then I experimented to see how high I could go. Are you going to tell me what's my independent variable after saying that? Shout out to QE. I think it was him I got that example from. But that's your point, right, AI?
What, to use
the
four
point
different
is that
terms as the same term and then change the term?
I'm sorry to cut you off. I just got to answer that. I'm sorry. Yes, but that's where we're going with this, or that's where this is ending up going, which is to say that this fine line, this blurring, this grey area is where the deception comes in, is where you get hoodwinked. So it's important to get it discussed. And I hope none of the panel, I'm not talking to you at this point, John, hopefully no one will take personally because, I'll direct it at Neil when he was like, I was only joking. It doesn't matter. It's not a joking matter when we're getting to the heart of some of the, I'm not saying more advanced listeners, but the people who've listened to everything we've got to talk about. And often we don't get to the how of the deception. Mm-hmm. We often go, well, it's not relevant to the argument, is it? We don't have to give you that. But it's nice to discuss it, and no one's lined a video up, so I'd rather let this roll. Right, AI and John, who wants to go first?
No, I just wanted to say something.
Oh yes,
what
D
you were
Rose.
speaking
Was
about.
that?
Okay,
Sorry, D
this
Rose.
is
You
in
were in the
regard.
queue. Go ahead.
This is in regard to the imagination, which stems from the word image, and like John and like what Eli and AI all were alluding to in regard to image and imagination and dreams and thoughts and reality. Is it fair to say, or is it accurate to say that only those who have images, dreams, delusions are those who have seen something in the past, whether it be on television, in a book, or in real life, that makes them imagine that or dream that? And with that being said, a child that's born with never having sight, what are their dreams? What are their thoughts? What are their images? What are their delusions? These are the things you have to think about when you try to get into that esoterical realm and that reality realm
before you get into
with the
that,
imagination.
before you forget your
You
question,
understand what I'm saying?
the answer is yes. Yes, it comes from their imagination. And how does it get there? Well, it's put there because you can only garbage in, garbage out. You can only process what you've got
There
to
you go.
process. So
There you
that's
go.
why the indoctrination starts so early with mobiles
Yes.
with planets on them.
Yes. Yes. Exactly.
Thank you for
Exactly. The
muttering
difference
yes
is.
through me.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
It's
Go ahead.
okay. Just a quick shout out to JML's 2024. He says correct. I don't know what that was in reference to because I stopped shouting out the super chats, but thank you very much for the super chat. Go ahead, D Rose. D Rose, if you want to wrap up your point, then we'll get back to John and AI.
I want to step in the queue as well.
Okay, Brian.
I didn't mean to interject into you, but I was getting excited because you nailed it. We was in accordance because that's what I'm saying. What we're seeing it from childhood. The differences between the realists and the ones who have the cognitive dissonance and the deluded, like I was saying in my super chat, is that they don't know when to differentiate it and detach themselves, understanding that the only things you've seen that made you think and dream and believe in this thing is a cartoon, an image, something fake, something illustrious, an illustration. It wasn't real, but you won't be able to, you can't distinguish that. That's the difference between when you come to full, mature, intellectual brain capacity to as an adult. You dig what I'm saying? In a way of just realizing that until you see a unicorn, touch the unicorn, or seen a carcass of one, then just because it's written about doesn't mean that it exists. Same
Sure.
thing with this space.
Sure, but
right,
when it comes to space and NASA, they're, to quote Dilly Gill, on the cutting edge of cinematography, and the art of the suspension of disbelief is an old art. Getting people to do that, to go through that process, is something that's been refined over hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, and that's all that's being used. TV, movies, adverts. That's all that's really being used. Messages on billboards. It's basic stuff when you think about it. Quick shout out, and then we'll go to. Still have. Hopefully they've kept all their thoughts, AI and John. That is. Then we'll go to Brian. Shout out to James Richard. He says, "You don't know how much I missed. I'll watch after. Your thumbnail has rumpus, and I didn't miss Master of the Universe? Question mark. Thank you very much for the super chat, James Richard. Also, Godzilla37 says, "Is this super chat real or imagined? It's a trick question." As the funds are in Canadian. Thank you very much for the super chat. Really appreciate the support, Godzilla and James Richard. Right, AI and John. Brian, hold that thought. Go ahead.
I was just going to say.
First, I want to answer. Go ahead.
John went first. Go ahead, John.
I just want to say that you have to keep it's a big warning bell when somebody won't define a word. So always look out for that. And when they use the word and they define it, make sure that they keep it in that context. Because the minute you let them slip out of it, they can use it 4 different ways and have you in a different world real quick.
Right, through equivocation. Go ahead, AI.
Yeah. So the problem is that the error that he just stated is what he used earlier, because he said that the globe wasn't real, and then later in his very own statement he said it was real.
No, I did.
So that's what the confusion that I was clarifying is that things can be used in a different sense in conversation, because words are ultimately just token meaning pairs, and in languages a single token can have multiple meanings.
And in truth, multiple meanings could have multiple tokens. So real means
Yeah.
one thing in one context, it means another thing in another context. It's not exclusive to one category in one context alone. So when somebody says the globe is real, you could both agree and disagree with them. You could agree that the globe most certainly is a real model projection of interpretation or a real interpretive matrix of information. It's that's what it is. But
Correct.
then for you to then say, oh, it's real in the sense that it's a tangible object is an exclusive connotative definition of the word.
Which is
I
why
got
jumping
it.
between
no,
the
John,
that
John, you're
is
absolutely right.
true.
And there's good conclusion, because you're both absolutely correct, which is to say that there's many different connotations and therefore interpretations of any word that can be used, and you have to define it. So if you've got the person to define it, you have to make sure they stay within that context that they've defined. Now, as soon as they move outside of the context, that's an equivocation fallacy, which is to say that they're using one word that they've defined and it has a specific meaning in the context you're discussing, and then using it in a different context to speak
This
out
is
both
why-
sides of their
That's
mouth.
only,
That
that's
expands it
only
up. The globe is
true.
real and it's not real. I got it. This is why
No.
it's
It's
so
only true
important
as
that
a
we get to
fallacy
define.
if you attempt to transpose the meanings in both instances. If you just use the word twice in the same logic string, but you mean it in two different ways, and with the context it can be discerned, then it's not a fallacy.
No, that's true. Also, in a specific example, if I was to talk about me traveling along that pre-made ramp for my BMX and describe how I was experimenting because I was on my way to a physics lesson to do an experiment, then that's still contextually correct, even though I've used both words contextually differently in the same sentence. But that's not what we're talking about. And you are right to point that out, because that is how it sounded by the way I used it. But I'm talking contextually in the arena we find ourselves in. That would be our opponents on the globe side, do most assuredly equivocate words and give them different meanings when using them in one context.
This is why we need to have them define the term gravity anytime they mention the word, because they do exactly that with gravity.
Exactly.
They won't define it, because when they define it within the correct current position in physics, they know that it's not a force. They've heard it many times. Yet they'll talk about it as though it's a force. So when refracted curvature is saying, like, make sure that they stay within the confines of the definition when they define terms, gravity is the best one to get them on. Because if they define it correctly, they know immediately it debunks their claim that apples falling from trees is caused by a pulling force, because it's not a force. It's paramount. That's why they won't ever do it. They'll always talk about it as though it's a force, but they'll never define it because it's dead the minute they do.
But George Musser gave them permission to have that concept of it as a force by telling them you can think of it as a force.
But Newton defined
that
a force. Newton defined that with Newton's first law of motion. So on the one hand, you've got Musser saying that you can think of it as a force, and on the other hand, you've got Newton's first law of motion that says well, an object will not move unless it's a force. So you play Musser off against Newton's first law of motion, and you immediately have a conflict that they can't get past.
Go ahead, AI.
So that being said, if you indulge me, I want to say this since Aunt Riley's here. It'll be salient for certain purposes that'll come to fruition later. But so they have force, right? And they have acceleration, they have speed, and they have all these terms that they have to use to get to the conclusion. So they say force equals mass times acceleration. Okay, that's fine. It's just a mathematical construct at that point, definitionally. So now we have acceleration. Okay, acceleration is a change in rate of speed over time. Speed is a change in distance over time. So in order for acceleration to exist, distance must be a part of that equation. Something must be moving from point A to point B. Now, in their worldview, they want to tell you that an object can be accelerating while standing still. It's necessary for their relativistic model. So the question then becomes, which came first, the force or the acceleration? And you can't have a coherent mathematical equation if there's no motion, because acceleration becomes irrelevant without motion. So their entire paradigm is incoherent on its face and can be summarily dismissed. And it's a great, real paradigm for me to poop on.
Let me respond to that. So when you say force equals acceleration, mass times acceleration, that's Newton's second law of motion. And what they always do is they always equivocate the first law of motion, which is an object at rest will remain at rest unless acted upon by a force. They'll always equivocate that with the second one, because you can calculate a force into existence using the second law, but you can't make something accelerate using the first. So just because you can calculate it with the second law does not make an apple fall. You need the apple to fall physically, right? So there needs to be an actual acceleration.
You do Newtons, but what the way they do it in modern terms of gravity is what you're essentially saying is you first have to have the acceleration. Well, they ascribe that to us with the terminology, with the letter. So while you're stood there or sat there doing nothing, you are ascribed 1g, aren't you? When you're falling, mathematically, when you're falling, you're in fall arrest. You're doing nothing as far as gravity is concerned. Now that's described as 0g. We see that as floating.
That's incorrect, though.
Right, but when we're on the ground, we're experiencing a force, a gravitational force of 1g. That's what's described.
Yeah, I'm sorry, no, just 1 second, Anthony. I'll just be a second. No, I don't mean to be stepping on you, Nathan. We're just saying it's correct about what they say, but they're incorrect. Because the whole claim is that the reason the thing is falling is due to g. That's the point. So you can't have 0g if the thing is falling. 0g is not falling. You understand? It's falling because it's been within that paradigm, being pulled to the center of the globe by the greater force of attraction between the globe and the smaller object, right? But why is it falling? If there's 0g, it can't be falling. 0g means not. Yeah, so I wasn't attacking you, Nathan. There, sorry.
No, I didn't think you were. I'm just gonna before Anthony goes and responds, I'm just gonna shout out a couple of super chats. Shout out to Sasha or Unitox Femu. He says oil rig on 9 miles means oil rig on 9 miles or question mark. Thank you very much for the super chat. Really appreciate the super chat. And also James Richard. He says the Bible says that Satan is in his heart wants to be amongst the stars. If most of the world wants to be amongst the stars, what does that tell you? I thought he was the ruler of Earth. Maybe I'm just misunderstanding my understanding of Satan. But there we go. Thank you very much for the super chat. Well said, AI. Yeah, I was going to commend him on that, actually, because he completely took apart the notion of the acceptance of gravity. He even clapped himself at the end, and he was deserving of it, but no one really recognised it. But it got you a super chat there. Well, it got me a super chat, actually, strictly speaking. But it did get you a mention in a super chat, AI. Well said, AI, says James Richard. And I agree. Right. As you put it up, Anthony, do you want to round out that point?
Just to further what Brian said, that is if you were to follow on from what Brian said, that is the reason why they always go to the vomit comet or the 0g plane, because no matter how much they try and describe the guy, because like they always take it from the frame of reference within the plane. Well, why is the guy like floating in the plane if he's falling? And they ignore the fact that the plane's falling out the sky. So if you're inside the plane and you limit reality to inside the plane, you can argue that he's not accelerating because from the frame of the reference of the plane, he's not accelerating, but the plane itself's falling out the sky. And that's the bit that they always ignore. They completely they forget about that. It's like they don't want to look at that bit. They only want to look at the bit inside the plane. So when they bring up the 0g plane, take it from the objective reality perspective outside the plane, from the bystander looking at the plane falling out the sky. Because the minute you do that, that guy's not falling. That guy's not. That guy's accelerating. He's not accelerating. He is accelerating. You just can't perceive it because the plane's falling with him at the same time. But the minute you do that, their argument's dead.
It is, and notwithstanding what Anthony's just said, but the overriding point of this is to, once you zoom out and stop arguing about whether or not something that, and Anthony even said it in that little bit just a second ago, is whether or not 0g. So you're saying on the scale, the thing that is quite glaringly obvious, just based on Anthony's description, is falling from the sky, in his words, right? That's something that's obviously occurring. But when you zoom out, you go, right, well, what's actually the net result of that? Well, that's described as 0 on the scale. Well, what's 1? What, an accelerative force being applied, 1g, right down, in the case of Newton, 9.8 meters per second towards the centre of Earth. Well, that's when you're in fall arrest. Then you're going 1g. So it's just a move. It's just a moving of the scale to get around the problem that was discussed earlier, What do you have first? Well, you first need an acceleration. Well, if you can ascribe that to nothing happening, you've achieved that, haven't you? Quite nicely in normality. Well, everything's got 1G.
I think
it's quite eloquent.
I think
miss
I
how
can tell you how
Globers
they
used
do
to
it
come here
mathematically.
and sorry.
Just shift the scale.
Right.
I think you can do it mathematically by saying that acceleration is speed over time when speed already invokes time. So that's how
No,
you get
that's
your
wrong.
seconds per second, right?
That's wrong.
He's not saying it's right.
Yeah.
He's just saying how they do it, Anthony. He's not saying it's correct.
Right, mathematically. If
No, but he said,
Let him say it first. Go ahead, John.
right, to say that acceleration is a change in speed over time, right? And I've heard it defined that way, right? And then speed is distance over time. If you put that into mathematics, you can get time squared and have per second. That doesn't make it make sense, though. You know
it doesn't
what I
make
mean?
it actual either.
Correct.
You're opening
No.
words. You're opening words where you can do it mathematically, but you can't do anything
Anthony,
mathematically.
stop. Anthony, he's not arguing for this. He's just saying how it can be done on the page. That's all he's saying.
I'm not arguing against him. I'm agreeing with him.
Fine.
His opening words were, you can do it mathematically, but you can do anything mathematically within the concept of mathematics. But that doesn't mean that you can make someone accelerate by using a bit of maths. That's why I have an abject disdain for mathematics, because it's used to substitute the actuality of an event. So you can make an event happen mathematically that is impossible in real world. You can't make an apple fall from a tree mathematically and then make it actually happen in real world, because it's not a doing. Mathematics isn't a verb, is it? It's descriptive, it's calculative, it's abstract and conceptual, but it doesn't cause anything to happen. And that's the bit that's why they always go to Newton's second law of motion and they ignore his first law of motion. You need that acceleration first caused by a force. But if you then go to maths instead, you haven't got the force to accelerate the apple, right? You haven't got anything to accelerate anything, but you need something to push. And if you haven't got that, by calculating it into existence, doesn't suddenly give you the ability to say, oh, well, there's a force there. You've just used a bit of maths. And that was the bit I was trying to put. I wasn't attacking John with that. I was attacking the point that John making, and that's what they always use. You can do it in maths.
No, I get it.
No, you can't.
It's sometimes easy to misinterpret you attacking the point as attacking the person as making the point when you're both on the same page. It's my bad, actually.
Right.
So my mistake.
Yeah,
I'll just say
that.
Sorry, real quick. I just want to say I miss how Globers used to come here and tell us how my coffee cup is accelerating while it's sitting still on the table.
Precisely. Good example. Exactly. Just a quick shout out to Unitox Femi or Sasha again. Whatever falling is will not curve the water. Correct. Thank you very much for the super chat.
Right.
I want to go after John.
Go ahead, Brian.
Right. But if you describe that coffee cup speed as 0, right? And that's 0 distance over however much time, right? And then you describe acceleration as a change in speed over time, but you have a 0 for the change in speed, then all of a sudden, like, you're imagining a force into existence. When you,
It's like that change in speed becomes what's that word they like to use? Negligible.
Well, no, I think it's a neat trick, because you're using time twice within the equation when it's already invoked by the word speed itself. So acceleration could just be called a change in speed, not over time. By introducing the over time, you're able to get that fourth dimensional idea from that.
Hey,
yes,
chocolate.
Clever trick.
Notice how negligible it is when they want it to be negligible, like in that instance that you were referring to. But when it's refraction and it's bringing buildings back from the distance, that's also negligible. It becomes paramountly important then.
Oh, of course, always. Especially with the little curvature thing. Like the dude that Nathan called Rumpus 2.0 that showed up here the other day. The only time he actually tried to invoke curvature, he said, but it's actually, the Earth is too big, it's negligible. It's like, it's so fantastic how they do that.
By the way, what a treat that was.
It was just amusing. There's a couple of people in the comments that fell victim to it as well, which is what he was attempting to do was make an angle a bit Bev-esque in that regards, Bev try thinking, and say, well, you can do nothing with an angle. Well, in this regard, he's going, Well, I don't have to reference the ground when I acquire an angle to two celestial items. There's nothing to do with the ground, he said multiple times. Like, well, no, it's got everything to do with the ground, but then you're going to be referencing the ground, and I can take him to obviously it being a horizontal reference plane in all instances when you're doing anything practical. But what he wants to do is take it away from the ground. Now, as I pointed out to a few people in the comments in the video afterwards, and indeed Anthony for that matter, he's trying to make a point with his claim that's directly connected to the ground, because it's the distance measurement to the sun from the ground. But when it comes to the angle, he doesn't want to reference the ground because he knows that he's obviously over a barrel immediately, and everyone on the panel knew it, right? So he doesn't want to reference the ground, so he's got to then make that disclaimer. It's got nothing to do with the ground. What, your measurement to the sun from the ground? See where I'm going? But a lot of people spotted that and were like, well, how are you saying welcome to flat Earth when you haven't got to the actual acquisition of elevation angle? It's like we haven't got there yet because he's saying it's not in reference to the ground when he's actually answering a claim of distance to the sun from the ground. Hope that's clear.
It was actually very clever by him to stay away from the ground.
No,
like
it
all of
wasn't. He's trying to make a claim from the ground to the sun. You're saying it's clever to relinquish that claim when he says it's got nothing to do with the ground because he's on a sticky wicket because I'm going to reference it as being flat whenever we get a baseline reference.
He didn't know who he was running into, though. That's the problem.
You mean it was good on the spot to think I'll get out of this by saying the angle could just be between two lights in the sky and I just hold up a tool randomly. I don't reference the ground, but then later reintroduce it with an R assumption because I'm going to apply Kepler's third law to all of this, which definitely references a spherical Earth, and I'm talking about measurement from the ground, but it's not referencing the ground. You think that's clever? I didn't.
That's like quick, look over there.
Yeah, they do the same thing with the elevation angle. Here's the angles. Where'd you get them? It's not important. We're not talking about the ground. It's like, what? Where'd you get the angles?
Could I just make my point before we move off of the subject too far about gravity? What I said earlier on about zero G. Good question. Even though a force of gravity is obviously gone since 1915, there's a huge amount of people who we deal with who keep on wanting to equivocate between falsely between what they're calling Newtonian and Einsteinian. But if we just focus on what they're calling Newtonian, it's not really Newtonian. And the claim of 1G and 0G. Can they give you, if I asked for a demonstration of 0G, they can never give it to you. Because I'll use Anthony's example of because this is what they would have said to Anthony. We've all heard it. The person in the plane is at 0G. No, the person in the plane is within a controlled fall, right? Which means that if you take the plane away, they'll still be falling. They just look a lot worse because they'll have the frictions of the air they're falling through. The point is that there's no such thing as 0G because 0G would be not falling. Falling means you're still falling. It means it's no different than standing on the ground.
Anthony, can
you know what I mean? Within that paradigm. So 0G does not exist. It can't exist within their claim of a force of gravity.
Hold your tongue, AI. Hold your tongue.
Well, 0G would have to have 0G. You would have to have G first, right? What's that?
And yet we're talking about it, so it must be real. I'm only joking.
Yeah, but the point I'm making is as Nathan, when they say you have 1G on you, and then they try and say that when you're in what they call a 0G plane, that you're in 0G, you're not. If it's 0G, that means there is no weight being given to what they're calling the mass of the plane or the masses of the people, right? Because within that paradigm, a force of gravity gives weight to a mass. So if it's 0G, that means
Anthony, hold on. Brian, hold on. Hold on.
Yeah, no.
Anthony, can you go on mute, please? Live show.
Why? What have I done?
You just can hear your dog barking.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, my point being, Nathan, if 0G would mean that there is no weight being given to these claimed masses, right? Which means they can't be falling, because the only reason they're supposed to be falling is because of weight being given to them by gravity. So 0G would be not falling, but they can't not fall. You understand what I mean? So the claim of 0G is a complete farce.
Right. So you just
Because
all
it
you
can't
do.
exist within their
It's
model.
easy. You just
It's a conception within their own paradigm.
no,
that is only
it's not a conception.
conceptual.
Hold on, I was just about to completely contradict that. You've ruined my point if you carry on. Right? No, it's not conception. You just remove one of the reference frames. It's really easy. So what you're talking about is you inside the plane. Right? That's what you've got to reference. Now, if you black off all the windows and you can't see the second reference frame, that's the plane moving through the air towards the ground at a fantastic rate. Right? What you're left with is you versus the surroundings. And there's no influence, seemingly, when you're falling, but you don't know that because the windows are all blacked out. So from that point of view, you're floating. Well, that's zero. It's like just a crap magic trick, isn't it? Just ignore everything around you. See? Weightless. Took away his weight. No, you did not take away his weight. The guy's hurtling towards the ground inside the plane. So he's definitely got weight, right? It's the plane that's displacing the air and the air inside the plane, as Anthony described earlier really eloquently. I'm not going to go over it again. Well, that's what's actually occurring, but that's what they want you to focus on, this discussion, as opposed to the bit that Brian's just discussed. When you're on the ground, you've got a force of 1G applied to you. When you're falling, it's zero. What? That's a ludicrous scale. But that's what they've done, because they need to conjure something from nothing.
Okay,
So
but
do you say-
we're talking about actual supposed G, not the plane dive.
No, hold on. No.
Zero-G.
Arwin, wrong again. The zero G that you say is actual zero G, and I know what you're referring to, is them falling around Earth, isn't it?
Yeah, but that's not zero G.
Yeah, it is.
No, it isn't.
It
That's
is.
officially
You
not.
being perpetually falling around Earth in orbit is no different to you being in space without any reference. In their models,
Arwen is correct.
In their model, actual zero G doesn't technically exist. It's really a thing that they like to do for movies, but even in their model, theoretically, zero G doesn't exist because there's always some gravity pulling somewhere in some way.
Yes, okay, no, I appreciate contextually. God, AI would be proud of you, Arwin, you bastard. Right at the end of the show, too. Yes, Arwin's right.
Haha.
I can't believe that.
That was me. I said that Arwen was right. Because my point being is that for something to be falling, what they call zero G requires G for it to be falling. So it can't be at zero if something is being pulled to the ground within their paradigm. Why is it falling if it's at zero? It should just be floating in midair, not falling. That's the point. Zero G is a complete farce.
It's a mathematical construct of shifting the scale, like Nathan said.
It's a neutralized G. It's not really zero because there is G's. There's a G and a counter G, but it's neutralized G. That's a better terminology for it, actually.
Big shout out to Retro Bill. It says, interesting tidbit. A core study principle in Scientology is to keep a dictionary handy at all times and constantly define terms to avoid misunderstanding. And I've been looking into Scientology. That is a very interesting tidbit, Retro Bill. Thank you very much indeed for the super chat. Now, if you are watching this on either Nathan Oakley 1980 or Nathan Oakley premiering streams, then stay tuned as there will be an after show to follow. Unfortunately, though, if you are watching this live, this is where we bid you farewell. So huge, massive thank you to today's Discord and G+ panels for making today's live show possible. And of course, a massive thank you to all of you in the Nathan Oakley live stream for smashing the super chat, liking, commenting, sharing, subscribing, joining as a member. Hopefully you got one of Godzilla's free memberships, one who's dishing out at the beginning of the show. Once again, stay tuned if you're watching on an after show. I've been Nathan Oakley, and I will see you all in the next video. Meet everybody here. What a lovely day!
Experiments.
Yeah, but we're talking about G, so
I just want to say I
What do
really
you-
enjoyed
how
that
do you
show.
neutralize?
That was great. Fine
Apart from my
discussion,
dog barking.
gentlemen.
I guess that's why it would be important to define what gravity is before you start talking about 0G, right?
That's what Anthony's been saying.
It's the most important
Yeah,
thing.
because
If you get them to define it, they know that they can't use Newtonian principles. It's not mass attracting mass, because immediately when they say that, they get corrected with Einstein. But they also know that if they do say Einstein, they also then know that it's a visual effect, more akin to refraction than it is akin to a force that can accelerate matter. So that's why they'll never define gravity. They'll talk about it, they'll describe it, they'll calculate it, but they won't define it. And that's where it kills them, because they know that if they define it, that it's game over.
well, the problem is that there's too many. I don't even know why Einstein, if he even did call it that, I don't know why it's called gravity, as it is it replaces what they call Newtonian, but it has nothing to do with the term gravity, because the term
I agree.
gravity,
It
because the
doesn't
term
really
gravity
replace it either.
no, it's not. Well,
It's just
what are
something
you
else.
what are you replacing? What are you replacing? You know what I mean?
Well,
You're
hold on.
replacing something that
Hold
doesn't
on, Brian.
exist
One
with something
sec,
else
they're
that
just
doesn't
one sec.
exist.
abandoning it.
Hold on,
right?
hold on. Owen's got a really interesting point, right? What I'm saying is, it's just something else. The fact that you've given it the same name is a bit like when you come up with like part 7 sequel of a movie and it has absolutely no similarity whatsoever to the original concept that was put out, right? It might have the same title, but it's got one tiny element that might be the same as the original. What I've been saying is, yeah, we're saying currently that it's superseded Newtonian gravity. What Arwen's just said, as profound as it is these two things have got nothing in association with each other whatsoever, other than the name.
That was my point.
Correct.
Well,
They're just
that was
they
my
just
point.
abandon the Newtonian gravity and then pull out something completely different in a different field that's completely conceptual and then just call it gravity. That's what they done.
Yeah,
Is that
that was my point.
equivocation?
1 second, John.
Go
I'll
ahead,
just be
Brian.
quick. That was my point. The point I'm making is that they call Einstein's general relativity gravity, but it's not, because gravity is a term that invokes a force that gives weight to a mass. That comes from the Latin word gravitas, which just describes heavy or weight. It's just the Latin word for heavy or weight. So gravitas, the word gravitas, the original Latin word, has no connection because it's a different meaning and doesn't make the same claim as the word gravity. The word gravity then
You'll have
within
AI all over you.
nothing
Hold
to
on,
do-
Brian. Yes, you're correct. Other than, no, etymologically it has no connection. But in terms of how it's being used, unfortunately, and in the mind's eye of people as a fantasy suspension of disbelief, it very much is gravity as we know it, and therefore is the replacement in the mind's eye of the people.
yeah.
I'm not saying that's correct, and we're very much pulling apart why that isn't correct, but I just want to point that out.
No, but the word gravitas just is a Latin way of describing something as heavy or has weight. It doesn't invoke.
I get
It's not an invoking of a
No,
force.
I appreciate
whereas
that.
gravity invokes a force.
No, you're
And when you
correct.
get to
You're 100%
Einstein,
correct.
then there
Hold
is
on,
no
Brian.
force, so there is no.
You are correct, and I understand that. But I'm just after bearing in mind what Arwen's just said, right? If you then say, okay, well, they're just totally different things, it's a misapprehension to say these things are connected, or, as we currently do, say one superseded the other. They're not connected. They're totally different things. So therefore, hold on, I'm nearly there. Hold on, I'm nearly there. Therefore, it's an etymological fallacy when you say, no, it's not, because formerly the gravitas description, etymologically speaking, was for weight, and fourth dimensional space-time has no connection to it, therefore invalid or void. It's like, no, it doesn't have to have an etymological connection, but in the mind's eye of the masses, there is a direct connection, or is in many instances, the same bloody thing when they say the word universally gravity. And it's just simply not the case.
Just allows you to equivocate easily.
Exactly.
But they call Einstein's general relativity gravity. And it has nothing to do with that term. What they do is they try and, psychologically, they try and add in Newtonian into it. Like we heard with Dr. Becky in that, where she'll go from talking about curved space-time to talking about an attraction between masses. It's like they're two completely different things.
Yeah, but
You're right.
It makes the equivocation
what's a
easier if
term?
you call both gravity.
Yeah, and the way it's structured
Einstein's
educationally.
gravitation.
I want you to come in after this, actually, Anthony. The way it's structured educationally is done to achieve that. That is to say, that equivocation is bred into people at an educational level. So you've got you up to university level being told that gravity, in no uncertain terms, is a force. And then you get to university and you get the other half of the doublespeak. They speak out the other side of their mouth and tell you about the fourth dimensional space-time bending. So the natural equivocation permeates through the populace, with the knowledgeable ones knowing better and your general understanding of it being, what the knowledgeable ones would have to dumb down to the people who are being deceived with the force. So therefore you have a natural societal level equivocation with these two words that are devoid of any connection to one another. Space-time bending and a force. There's nothing to do. They're so devoid of any connection.
Talk
Yeah,
about
that's right.
fallacious reasoning. Like, that's a fallacy that's literally taught and put in
Yeah.
place in the system. That's crazy when you think about it like that, right?
Nathan's
And can I
correct
add
that
real quick?
they're not connected. Nathan's correct when he says they're not
No,
connected.
it's
because, like,
Arwin.
Newtonian-
Brian, 2 weeks ago. Who's correct?
I just wanted to ask something real quick back to what AI was saying about denotation, connotations, and then to the point of, I think it was John talking about the etymological definition in Latin for gravity. This is back to the point that I was making with righteous at one time. It doesn't matter that words have become diversified and have expanded in Pig Latin or slang. At the end of the day, the etymological, which is the original denoted definition of a word, stands. It's like stare decisis in law. That is the word. And when you're supposed to be assuming yourself or self-proclaiming yourself as a scholastic, individual, connotations doesn't work. Not in that paradigm of giving, lectures or intellectual teachings. You can't use connotations and expect for your audience, the normies, the newbies, the student, to really get a real comprehensive understanding and learn anything. So, irregardless that the word dope in hip hop means, fly, stupendous, at the end of the day, dope came from a old Dutch word, I think, that has to do with dough or something like that, or the way something curdles and soup. I don't know what it is, but it's totally different from what it's used. It doesn't describe heroin. So regardless of Webster dictionaries using words like deaf and everything for connotative reasons, at the end of the day, the etymological definition is where it stands. And in this word gravity, you can see how the heliocentric side abuses the word in so many different aspects, as y'all are describing.
Yep. And the best example of the use of a word changing like that is the word gay. Gay means happy, right? Historically, traditionally, etymologically speaking, it means happy, right? Well, we don't use that word to mean happy anymore.
Exactly. Great point. That's another good point. Excellent. Yep.
I do.
Yeah,
I
but
was
see,
so
the
gay
problem is that
yesterday
a
that
word.
Philadelphia lost.
Oh yeah, Neil. Hey, real quick, Neil, on that. That was a good call according to the rule. And if your defense is supposed to be impeccable and invincible, don't let a one-legged
No, I
man
don't
come
like
back
that.
and beat
I
you
don't like
in the
it.
second half. If the
I don't
defense
like
would
it.
have
It
played their
tainted the game.
game,
It tainted
it wouldn't
the
have came
game.
to the point. Huh?
Tainted the game. It tainted the game. They should have left it alone and let Philadelphia have it with a minute
Philadelphia
left.
should have
Sorry.
Philadelphia should have played defense in the second half and not allowed a 2
Now, hold
point
on a
deficit.
second. He held them within 5 yards. I wasn't
Oh, my
rooting for
goodness.
Philly, believe me.
Okay, guys.
Neil, do you get the point? If the game would have been played defensively better by the Eagles, that call would have never mattered if they would have kept their 2-digit deficit lead. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah,
The
no, I
defense
agree.
allowed that opportunity. The defense of Eagles failed, allowing that opportunity
I
for
just
that
hate when the
ref to
refs
make
get in the
that
way,
call.
though. Hate when
But
the
then
refs
if they
get in the
don't
way.
get in the way, then you say they missed the call. New Orleans
No,
versus the
I want
Rams.
to take all instant
Oh, my
replay
goodness.
away.
Go to the sports channel.
You didn't change the subject. Another word I wanted to say is like when Nathan said he had to make sure everybody understood when he said, you're outside, you're at school smoking a fag. He wanted to let you know that means cigarette in the UK. Because here in the United States, It is a politically incorrect, pejorative statement to talk about a homosexual male. See, these are the words that you can find in the dictionary that have these 6, 7 definitions way down on the bottom against the etymological definition. So back to that.
I don't understand. I don't understand why everybody in England is not a flat earther since they live in flats.
Anyway,
Righto.
I think the one thing that like people on our side of the topic need to recognize, like early on, and they don't, they struggle with it, is that when they conflate Einstein with Newton, they're fundamentally different. Like Nathan says, like Newton, it was a force of attraction between masses that he had ascribed against him when he was dead. But Einstein, it's a visual effect. It's more akin to refraction than it is a force. It's more like Skunk Bay, when you see things that appear to move when they're not actually moving, and it's caused by the medium, the bending of space-time. That's caused by mass. That's what Einstein's comparing it or describing Skunk Bay. He's not describing an apple falling from a tree, but they conflate that conveniently because the more they say the word gravity, the more you think that there's a force, even though you're contrasting it. You instantly say gravity and you think force. Can't help it. It's just the more you say it, it reinforces the notion of a force, even though you're saying it's not a force. So it's a really weird paradox where no matter how you say, no matter how much you redefine the term or point out that they don't understand the term, it's still, no matter how much you talk about it, it becomes not only a real thing, it also becomes a force again by the end of the conversation. It's bizarre.
But the thing about it is that I forgot my point, so I shut up.
Well, it's an emergent force.
I had something to say and I forgot about
Okay. Yeah. So
it's
look,
an emergent force
you
of
can
gravity
talk about this
caused
all
by
day
gravity.
long. Exactly, that's the key. So you could talk about it in circles all day long, but that's the point. It's a circular argument. It requires the cause to come after the effect, and vice versa. What they're trying to get away from is the number one problem in their entire paradigm is a first cause fallacy. They have no coherent first cause for the universe and for all this motion that's required for everything that they dream of to happen. Because their entire paradigm is based on nothing standing still, ever. Nothing is at rest at any time, at any moment, ever, in any circumstances. An object that's standing still to you is actually accelerating in multiple directions simultaneously. They require this fundamental flaw in order for their paradigm to function.
Well, prior to that, though, wasn't it just how to justify living on a sphere? You know, like what to answer the questions of how you could live on a sphere was to say gravity. That, like prior to what you're talking about, because you're talking about it in the larger sense of the materialistic philosophy. But when it originated, it was just to explain how you could live on a sphere is with gravity.
Well, that would make sense, right?
Well, yeah, it's
Because
based on
there's
the
no way. Sorry.
ubiquitous. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say, but
one of us
that would
has to
have to
go.
make. Okay.
Keep going.
Yeah, real quick, I'm just gonna say to John, like, of course they would have to, if they're going to assert that we all are living on the outside of a spinning shape, a spherical shape, they would have to actually come up with a reason as to how that's possible in reality. So there's no way you could assert one without the other.
Somebody's off mute.
But AI overlord's point is true for the current paradigm that they have established now in the materialistic natural philosophy, whatever you want to call it, is they need that first cause for their religion to make sense in their minds. So, you know, there's multiple levels to what gravity is to them as well, even in the circular reasoning argument, you know?
Well, they had to get rid of a force of gravity because it didn't work for them. They couldn't prove it. And it was debunked by simple things like objects in a vacuum. That killed them. Industry killed them. But they can't get away from it because they need it. So the thing they need, they can't prove the existence of. And actually, worse than that, it's debunked by simple things to do with weighing of stuff in vacuums.
So Brian, how come people didn't wake up to that? Once they saw that they couldn't freaking prove it, they just allowed Einstein to come in with pseudo-Ramonian force space and nobody said nothing?
Well, they needed something, Neil, to keep the model alive. Because if they didn't have Einstein and his general relativity, they were lost. Because it was only a matter of time before the general public were going to find out that, you know, they just couldn't keep the model going because their model has to keep building. They can't have confines. So to build the model further and further out into imagination land, which is space to them, to do that, they needed Einstein. They were stuck. Let's just say all the geeks were stuck when it came to what they're calling Newtonian, because there was things within their model that they needed to work for the model to work. They didn't work correctly with what they call Newtonian. So they needed Einstein to keep this. It's like starting to write a book, and you get 2 chapters in, and you realize you need something else.
That's not entirely correct, though.
One second. Just for Neil, it's like trying to write a book, and you get 2 chapters in, and you realize that you need a drastic change to start to keep writing the book, because where you're going won't work. Go on, Arman.
It's not entirely true, though, because actually Einstein gravity doesn't work at all. It only works as a slight modification at the end based on assuming everything works Newtonian. Newtonian gravity just didn't have any kind of answer to what happens with extreme gravity. Like it doesn't even address that at all, right? So those types of extremities, they go for Einstein gravity, and to kind of the orbit of Mercury, right? We can't get it to fit Newtonian, so we're just adding that on with Einstein gravity. But there is no Einstein gravity-based model because it doesn't work. Literally, it can only be used as a supplement afterward, because you can't make a model out of it because you can't calculate the gravity for multiple bodies. It just doesn't work at all. You can't even build a model with it.
Right, but my point was, where were all the learned men? Where were all the men of intelligence? Were they all in the same group to try to perpetrate this lie instead of just saying, hey, this is not it? Maybe we don't live on a sphere.
Sorry for stepping on.
Personally, I don't think that at that
and
time
what-
that the globe was mainstream anyway. That's just my personal thing, but I don't think it was mainstream at that time.
It was just like comic books. It's just nerd stuff.
and
That's
with
what it
what-
was then.
You're saying they were in a dark room. They were in a dark room putting this shit together, and it was the outside world knew nothing about it. And then, bam, heliocentric model. This is where we live, and everybody accepted it. I can't accept that.
No, check it out. With that
they
being
didn't
said,
accept it.
Aaron, with that being said, it goes back to the lie that the heliocentric concept, which I'm gonna call it a concept, was 2,000 or whatever years old. Because if it was in fact that Newtonian and then got debunked by Einsteinian, the fact of the matter is that it really is nothing but a 20th century, if maybe I wouldn't even say a late 18th century. I would say more of a 20th century, 1900s type of concept, mere concept that just came out. They burnt the books, if you will, so to speak, and started pushing this. And the only one they had at the time, which was, I think, like Newtonian, was so phallus that they couldn't do anything else but make Einsteinian's concept overrule that, so that it can reinforce the heliocentric concept, but in more of a so-called, but really a pseudoscientific manner that nobody with the common mind can debunk. And they've been riding with it ever since.
But it didn't. It
I'm not
didn't
saying it
fix
did. I'm not
anything.
saying
It
it
only
didn't.
made it worse.
Yeah, but that's only considered in your mindset, in this panel's mindset, not in the general public's mindset. And that goes back to the
Yeah, but
Neil
that's
saying,
because they
where
don't
were all
know.
the
Because they don't know.
where were all
Because
the
the
but
people that
Neil's
do
point
know,
is where
they know it
Neil's
doesn't fit.
point is where Aaron, Neil's
Sorry.
point is where were all the geocentric knowing people? Were they sold out? Were they dead? Were they tied up with a gag in their mouth? Why did they let this ride? When they knew
the
better,
black ball.
if it's so blatantly a farce, why did they let it ride?
They didn't
That's the
let it
point Neil's
ride,
asking.
but they didn't let it ride. But these heliocentrists, which started with astronomy pretty much in the 18th century, then went on to evolution and dinosaurs in the 19th century, and then went on to the full globe spectrum nonsense and futurism in the 20th century, they were always protected by the priesthood, by the actual church. And that's what they lie about. They say that, oh no, the church was persecuting them. No, they weren't. The church created them, protected them from the other Christians that didn't agree to it. So they were always a protected class from the start.
Because it was
starting with the astronomers.
It was a Catholic priest that was one of the founders of this whole crapola stuff. I don't know what his name is. Y'all know what his name is. They got him right there. He was like one of the
George Lamette.
Yeah, but he's not the starter. He merely rounded it up with the Big Bang in the 20th century. Right?
The starter was Copernicus.
He put the capstone on.
And Kepler.
Just be careful bad-mouthing
Right.
Einstein too much. Just be careful bad-mouthing Einstein too much because they do have LIGO. Because they do have LIGO, and they tout that as being proof of bending space-time. Now, whether it is or not, is not my point. My point is that they do have a rebuttal to it, but they never use it in this context. They only ever use LIGO to basically negate.
Wait a second. LIGO, really? What's
It's just a technobabble machine. It's just like, oh, look at this. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Yeah, that means it's gravity.
What's
That's
up with him, Anthony? And we'll pull it apart.
Pardon?
And we'll pull it apart.
You see,
I
my
think I know
friends,
straight away it was the force.
You guys
It's
you
the
guys all
same
missed the most
nonsense.
important
LIGO
scientist
proving
in
gravity is the
entire
same nonsense
endeavor.
as some box in the middle of a building supposedly giving a moon signal rebounds. That's the same kind of nonsense. It's just a setup to trick you into making you believe that it's real. That's all it is.
Right.
Yeah, but what's the
Right, exactly.
LIGO
So I
claim?
need to ask this question. The actual LIGO claim is that it's a building that they built and got a lot of money for. There you go. Problem solved.
No, that's not.
The most
that's not their claim.
important claim necessitated to it is readings of a gravitational wave, which, by the way, are less in amplitude than the mains hum of the devices. Now, mains hum is a feedback which you all have experienced in your life, the whining of electrical devices. So the mains hum in the system is actually greater than the magnitude of any kind of a gravitational wave that would interfere with the machine. So it's impossible to know which is which. Now, it just so happened, and why I said about money is important, and it'll come to fruition right now, that they discovered this right about when their funding was going to come up. Oh, interesting, isn't that?
Coincidence.
So is this gravity, with these gravity waves that they measure, is that a force? Is that a force based?
No,
Because how are you also going to measure it? What are you going to measure if
gravity
it's a force?
waves are Einstein. Let me just let me because they didn't go the way
If you
I wanted
measure
it to go.
something, then what are you going to measure if not a force?
This is what I want to give clarity on it. Gravity waves move through the universe at the rate of the two-way speed of light calculation. And that's where their basis is for everything to do with Einsteinian, is the two-way speed of light calculation. As Adam called it before, that's the glue that holds the whole heliocentric model together these days. So what they do is they are referring to this calculation, terming it as a measurement, and carrying on as if they're doing something. They're not doing anything. The two-way speed of light calculation is based on the average distance. This is what it's actually based on, the average distance between the globe Earth and its heliocentric sun over a 12-month period. That's exact, and I could put out the math.
Sure.
I have the math.
Okay. But
For
Brian,
sure.
are
But
you
that-
saying that
but
they're
it
not
all comes
actually
back to that.
measuring anything then? That they're just
No.
calculating? Is that
Yeah,
what you're
but
saying?
they're calling it a measurement. Yeah.
So they're just making a calculation. They're not
okay.
even actually measuring anything. They're just
Okay.
lying about that. Then.
Yes, exactly. I have the answer. I have the answer for you.
AI,
Okay,
was
so
you the
you
one that
do
said
this
about the
calculation. You do the calculation, right? And you come up with a number, right? You then take that number as a permutation of probability against a background field of noise that's caused by electrical interference in the system. As soon as you get an approximate match that's within a tolerable measurement of error that you have decided to be acceptable, you stamp approved on it. I approved gravity wave. You send it to the people who are paying your money via grants, and you say, can you please reestablish my money? And they say, oh, wow, you proved gravity. When really all you've done is just put some numbers on the screen. Which, by the way, listen, let's be clear. This is also the same process that they use with the quote unquote bounce off the moon. Okay, none of these morons ever actually tell you when you ask them, what's the physical displacement in free space of the relative bodies of the moon and the earth in the time that it takes for the return signal? They can't answer that question because there's 11 different vectors, yet they think that they're getting this single photon back. No, they don't. They have a field of background noise. They just run it ad infinitum cycles until they get a match that's sort of correct. And they say, look, it came back.
Yeah, that's one way, and the other way is just, oh, look at, there's a lamp going off in the machine. That means it just got the return signal, and they don't even share it.
This is something I try and hold on, Owen. This is something I try and harp on about, right? You're adding complexity to it with various different vectors that they're not accounting for. But even if they were accounting for it, where are they getting the maths to say at 8 minutes and 27 seconds we'll see the return signal? Well, that's all based on Kepler. It's all based on Huygens. It's all based on R. It's all based on all of those string of assumptions to say at 8 minutes there should be a return signal so that they can look at 8 minutes and go, yeah, it's there. Look, definitely. Like, well, hold on. Why would it be at 8 minutes? Well, because the heliocentric model says it will be. The fact that they're looking at 8 minutes is what you should focus on, not the fact that they say they have or haven't found it at 8 minutes. It's like the 8 minute bit is the bit that's come from the heliocentric model in the first place.
Yeah, let me add another layer of plausible deniability. So when you have the expectation of single photon return, then you also have the expectation of the inverse square law, and you also have the expectations of random permutations of probability of the angles upon which that light will leave. You can actually fail to accomplish this task thousands upon thousands of times, get one random false positive, and claim that that's truly the measurement.
Is that a form of pareidolia?
Texas sharpshooter fallacy.
Kind of.
Well, what I'm saying though is
that too.
Like, you know, when you see faces in random objects and you assert that that's ghosts or whatever, but it's just pareidolia.
Yeah, pareidolia.
Is that sort of the same thing as seeing a return signal in static?
Yes, absolutely. So let me explain it to you very simply. Let's say you have a human face, right? And you want to copy it with the static in the TV. If you run the cycles ad infinitum and isolate single pixels, right? Eventually, if you pick the favorable results of all of them, you will be able to duplicate in black and white the human face you wanted to find. It's going to happen eventually.
Isn't that the 100 monkeys argument? That eventually, if you get 100, is it 100 or 1,000 monkeys typing randomly on a typewriter? Eventually,
no, it's not the same, and no, it's not true.
It's not the same.
I just
the reason why it's not the same.
Social effect. It's different.
It's seeing patterns.
No, that's not what he's meaning. He's meaning that what he's saying is the old argument about information. Okay, so there's a classical theological argument that the presence of long string information is proof of an intelligent design. The counter argument is if you put a bunch of retarded monkeys just stamping away at typewriters, eventually you get the works of Shakespeare. Now, how these things are not analogous is that you would need a scientist to come in to the monkeys every so often and isolate fragments and then put them together later. So the 100 monkeys is purely random. This other thing is actually being curated by the agent who's involved. So they have a favorable result that they want to get, and they just manipulate it till they get that result. And they isolate strings of information until they collect enough of them to say, okay, I have a positive result, therefore give me more money. for my
And
machine.
I
It
You guys
costs
want to hear?
billions of
You guys want
dollars,
to hear
and it's really
something?
worth nothing.
I want to interject what AI is saying, what y'all have been saying, back to what Neil was asking, and why the same way right now with the so-called roll up your shoulder, take this because it's going to help that, and the moon landing, and with this heliocentric whole propaganda campaign, is that what happened to the geocentric ones that knew better? Either they were incentivized or compromised, because just like this platform right here, when the money comes in, the financing individuals, they wouldn't know the difference between a petrified piece of wood, a rock, a stone, and a brick. So they just look at it like, oh my God, this is compelling. Oh my goodness. How much do you need? Let me write a check, in order to push this thing that these so-called people they consider scientists are telling them that's blowing their minds. So they give out this money, and they're going to keep bringing that stuff that brings the money. And then they're going to go tell the opposition side, hey man, shh, don't rock the boat, man. You can get a cut of this. And that's when the person's integrity is challenged. And they say, okay, it ain't hurt nobody and kill nobody. Just make people a little bit stupid for a few generations. Let's make this money. Come on, man. This is what has happened since the whole new thing across the board, whether you talk about religion, every aspect of culture, by the same parties have done this, that are doing what y'all are talking about. And that's where Neil's
Well,
question is
D-Rose,
answered.
well, here's the thing,
That
though.
go-
Well, maybe back then it was a problem, but now I think we're having results, because I think my son has been sneakily listening to Flat Earth debate, because I overheard him talking to my wife, which is his mother, of course, about wave function collapse and probability distributions and double slits. And I'm like, hold on, where are you coming with this? He's really into the quantum mechanics. So I think he's been sneaking and listening to Flat Earth debates, because he never
That's
spoke
good.
about that before. Yeah, that's
All right.
good.
All right.
Or it could be a form of
what they
confirmation
did,
bias.
what they did, just go back to what Neil's original question was: where was all the people saying, "What's going on here? This is false," when they tried to insert Einstein's general relativity? But they had already inserted what they called Newtonian long while before that, right? The point is that they had people already believing that pseudoscience was science, and they didn't need to do anything because they had the majority of the world just willing to go along with them. And if you go back to 1915, when Einstein's general relativity was coming in, and Anthony made this point in the past, what was that? What was World War One? And soon after that happened World War Two. So it was easy. It was easy for them to get these things on the board, because they had two world wars distracting everybody, which is the two biggest events that we are aware of in history. Like,
If we ascribe malice to it, yes.
The perfect distraction technique.
Poor
Eh?
Poor August Picard, who decided to go up in a
It does me.
stratospheric balloon at the time, and what was it, 1936? Went up and said, "Ah, seems like a flat disc with an upturned shape, with an upturned edge." Let's ignore that.
It does make you wonder what else gets distracted away from when there's a war. Like, so 9/11, for example, like what else could they get rid of whilst 9/11 was a big topic? The Iraq war, what else could they get rid of at the same time? Because people wouldn't care about anymore, because the bigger pressing issue is the war, right? Distraction technique.
Dude, didn't you know there's UFOs now all of a sudden? I mean,
really?
That's my favorite shit
I've
right
never
now.
heard of, like, they probably never heard of Roswell before, because that was only like one of the most internationally famous made up bullshit stories ever. But now all of a sudden UFOs. Ooh.
Not only that,
Didn't
the
you know?
chunks of
well,
the
do you
sun
want
are
me to tell
falling
you a
off.
funny story? You want to hear
Did
a
you
funny
hear that?
story?
No.
You know, sorry, Neil, go on. You say your thing. Sorry.
I was just going to say, they're saying that chunks of the sun have been falling off for the last 20 years.
Yeah, it's still the same size as it always was. It never seems to burn out or go away. It's just the same thing all the time. So they can say what they want about it, because nobody can
Ryan,
prove
you got
any
be
different.
very afraid. Be very, very afraid.
Well,
Suddenly the
about
sun's
light of
going to
that, the sun
explode any
changing
second. It's going to
size.
turn into a black hole, and then we all die. Yeah, Neil, be very afraid.
Yeah. But about the black hole point, you know the show Coast to Coast Radio. They've been going for a long, long time. And they do a lot of kind of conspiracy type stuff on it. But they were mainly known for a lot of UFO stuff, right? And they're kind of the first and biggest of all those kind of conspiracy channels out there. Well, they have been detailing how there's less and less people seeing UFOs and having interactions with aliens. And it seems to be decreasing for the past 10 years or 6 or 7 years. And it seems to be decreasing at the same point as everyone's realizing the Earth is not a globe. You know what I mean? While more and more people are realizing the Earth is not a globe. Now, they're not saying this. Their excuse, their supposed experts, their supposed experts given reason for this decreasing in people having interactions with aliens and seeing UFOs is that the aliens did all the things they needed to do here and they're going away. It's pathetic. No, you're talking a lot of rubbish for the past God knows how long. That's what's going on.
The part that I love right now with all this silly balloon shit and the UFO and trying to conflate the two. What I'm loving about it is, first of all, everybody's the people that are paying attention, right? Everybody's looking at the sky, right? That's number one. Number two, where years ago when I was told I'm just a crazy flirter because we don't need to put things on balloons anymore because we have technology, right? That's what I was told 5, 6, 7 years ago. Apparently, that's not the case anymore because now all of a sudden there's a balloon phenomenon or some type of phenomenon where things are in the sky and they have to be shot down because in the last week, supposedly, according to the news, they've shot down 4 things, right? And now, because of that, now the questioning of the satellites has started because people are saying, well, why are we not tracking these things with these satellites that are supposed to be even better than they are, right? And then if there are satellites up there, well, then why do we need the balloons? To me, it's hilarious. And twice this weekend, I've heard the curvature of the Earth being brought up, as opposed to radar and why the radar can't pick these things up. So it's almost kind of just amusing to me that it's like they're scrambling with the story right now because they don't know what to do. It's hilarious to me. That's it. That's all.
With the UFOs, they're saying that the UFOs, less people having interactions with UFOs and aliens because the aliens have gotten all the things they needed here and they're starting to go away. It's like that's the same thing as with the balloons. It's like, how come we have balloons? Where's the satellites that are supposed to be?
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Can't the satellites track the balloons and they're coming up with all kinds of nonsense? Yeah,
exactly. The same satellites that supposedly could read the time off my watch, right? As I walk around on the ground, but they can't pick up these giant balloons that are supposedly right there, 60, 70,000 feet up. Oh, you can't pick those up.
Excellent.
But they can see the time on my watch. Oh, okay.
Exactly.
There's been more balloons than that. Now they're saying that happened with Trump at least 8 times.
Oh, so they're admitting that there's balloons in the air all the time now. Again, I thought it was crazy because I thought I was told we don't need that anymore. We have satellites and rockets and stuff. Right, Globers? What are all these balloons doing up there, Globers?
Yeah. So the thing with Trump is the guy who was his defense secretary, I can't remember the guy's name now. He never told Trump because it's something like he didn't want to worry him or something stupid like that. He never told Trump. So it's come down to, is Trump responsible for these balloons or not? Well, technically he's not responsible because his defense secretary at the time never told him. So that's case closed. It's like, no, where are your satellites? That's what's going on, not whether Trump is responsible for balloons. It's ridiculous.
Nah, that was the quick hustle, right? Oh, you guys have this balloon that's traversed the entire continental United States. Why haven't you shot it down? But Trump had one. It's like, really? Are you 5 years old? Oh, Trump had one? But you just found that out now, and you're only telling us now that we know that you've got one now that you decided to not shoot down. All of a sudden, you want to talk about Trump's balloon. But I thought you guys hated Trump. Every second of the day, anything you could talk about Trump, you would have brought it up. So why didn't you find this out? I'm confused. It's hilarious.
Well, if they turn it into a political conversation, people will stop thinking about the fact that there are balloons that look like satellites. That's the thing, isn't it?
Exactly.
You know, that's the whole plan. It's like, don't have people talking about where are the satellites. You know, go on, sorry.
And
they
why
need to
is it
redo Louis
that...
Armstrong. Louis Armstrong.
Go ahead, bro.
This might need to cover. This might need to cover Louis Armstrong song. You know, it's a wonderful world. Like, it's a stupid ass world. Because they dumb as
that was pretty good.
turtle doodle. I'm just saying, man. The stuff people fall for, man. All it takes is somebody with a badge.
Did any of you guys hear the other day? I heard Michio Kaku was on a television show somewhere, and he was telling the host about the fact that the core of the Earth has stopped moving or something.
Going the other way, according to... Yes, we've covered it a lot, but yes, we have all heard.
Oh, good. Okay, cool.
We covered it the day it came out, actually. He's been doing the rounds.
All right.
It not only just stopped, bro, it's going the other direction now. So, yeah.
Well, hold on.
Maybe that was the point of the balloon, to take people... Come on.
I was just going to say that's acceptable, because if I wrote Narnia, right, and I said Aslan's a bad guy now, and then that's fine, you know, because it's my intellectual...
Because you made it up yourself.
Whatever I want to with it.
Well, I can't disprove it.
That can be
you know what I mean? I'd have to, if I wanted to disprove it, I'd have to actually prove it first. Sorry, Nathan.
That's going to be my cue to round out. So with that, I'm going to say a huge, massive, enormous thank you to both Discord and G+ panels for making today's after show possible. And of course, a massive thank you to all of you in either Nathan Oakley 1980 or Nathan Oakley Premium streams for hopefully smashing the super chat, liking, commenting, sharing, subscribing, joining as a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member, and all that good stuff. I've been Nathan Oakley, and I will see you all in the next video.